So to kick off this afternoon, we have two incredible entrepreneurs that have been making a huge difference in our nation. And they're here to share their ambitions and their hope for the future and how to go from talking about it to making it happen, which is also an entrepreneurial trait. So we have with us the Right Honorable David Johnston, an eminent Canadian citizen, thinker, advocate, and leader, and served recently as one of Canada's most respected and beloved Governor-Generals. A graduate of Harvard, Cambridge, Queen's Universities, he was the Dean of Law at the University of Western Ontario, Principal of McGill University, President of the University of Waterloo. He is the author and co-author of 26 books, holds honorary doctorates from over 20 universities, and is a companion of the Order of Canada. And we also have with us, David currently serves as the chair of the Rideau Hall Foundation, one of the primary supporters of this event. The Rideau Hall Foundation is an independent, non-political, charitable organization established to mobilize ideas, people, and resources across the country to tap into our national spirit and to help with our shared aspirations, prioritizing education, leadership, giving, and supporting a culture of innovation across Canada. And because entrepreneurship is all about partnership, he's not coming alone. We also have Charles Chang, graduate of SFU, I'm just saying. Charles Chang is a Canadian entrepreneur with a passion for innovation, active living, and mentoring. In 2015, Charles was the president and founder of, 2005, was the founder and president of Vega, which he started from scratch in his basement. And since then, his relentless determination and triple bottom line approach to innovation have earned him many awards. Charles' activities also span the continuum, just like this event, as he is the co-founder of PowerPlay, this wonderful program that we've seen out here today, and the students should definitely go check out. He helped establish the Charles Chang Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Simon Fraser University, an interdisciplinary home and academic hub where students and ideas converge to foster entrepreneurial thinking and action. And he also went on to found Lyra Growth Partners to provide smart capital and brand-savvy coaching to young and fast-growing companies. Please welcome them to the stage.
Hi.
Howdy.
Hear us okay? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for coming out. He's not a very busy guy, not a lot to do, so, you were just around, but no, very much appreciate it.
Just relax and go to sleep now, Charles.
Love so many great things that you do, and fostering a culture of innovation for our country. First things first, why don't we tell the audience and speak about what is innovation, how is it different from invention, and just talk us a little through about why it's so important.
Well, innovation is very simple. It's simply doing things better. So it's a mindset of looking at something and saying, how can we do it better? And it's not just technological innovation, and it's not just business innovation, which you've done so well, Charles. It's also social innovation. Canada's a social innovation, huh? Canada is a society built on a very unusual premise that diversity, inclusivity can actually work for you. Most societies try to be homogeneous, to be as focused as they can on very, very tight common values. Canada is the opposite, and somehow we make it work, but we have to make it work constantly. There's a distinction between those three concepts of discovery, invention, and innovation. I'll give you the Latin words if you want, but I won't. But discovery essentially means to uncover completely, like the laws of the universe. And then invention comes from invenare, which means to come into or to arrive at. Remember Venite Adoramus, the Christmas carol? Come, we adore him. Come into. But innovation is a different concept. It comes from innovare, and it means to refresh or to alter. And usually innovation is a step-by-step series of things that make something better, and usually with a fair number of failures along the way through. So it's not a discovery of the laws of the universe, physics or mathematics, and it's not that blinding new technological advance that you patent. It's usually a series of step-by-step improvements with a lot of failures along the way. And so what you want to do, Charles, is you want to develop that habit of mind that you're always looking at something and saying, how can you do it better? And how do I see failure as a teacher, as something that permits me to go back at it and do a little bit differently, do it better?
I love that. That means everyone and all of us can be innovative, not just those in science or STEM or technology.
Let me turn that to you then. You're an innovator. How did that happen?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and I think about really early on, I was sort of the derelict child who didn't really have a place and didn't know what I was doing and very bad at school and all those things. So I had to figure out another way to feel successful. And so I innovated by combining my passions with trying to do some business from a very young age. My favorite first story was I still love fishing. I used to go to like ponds and catch like little fish, then throw them in a bucket, jump in the bus. I was like probably 8 or 10 years old, and go around to pet shops and aquariums to sell them to try and make dough. Because I was better at that than like mowing lawns or like painting or something like that. So that was a different way for me to get through and do something that I loved, and I could reach my goals.
Oh, good. Charles, in front of us, we got a couple of books there that we should talk about, because I think some of you will get a copy of these books at some point today. One is called Ingenious: How Canadian Innovators Made the World Smarter, Smaller, Kinder, Safer, Healthier, Wealthier, and Happier. We kind of run out of adjectives after that, but that was a start. And the other is the children's book, or the student's book, Innovation Nation. Again, How Canadians Made the World, etc. It's a book that Tom Jenkins and I wrote, and the reason we wrote, first of all, the adult version, it was as a parallel to the Governor General's Innovation Awards that started 3 years ago. And it was, we said, Canadians are innovators, but we don't know enough about them. So why don't we tell the stories? And we said, we'll put together 50 stories of Canadian innovators. And we found that 50 arrived very quickly. So we said, we'll do 150 for our 150th anniversary last year. And we got to 150, and we still had more. So we got up to 297. And the publisher said, that's all we can put in this size book. So we had to stop. And then we developed a website, innovationculture.ca. It's now CanadianInnovationSpace.ca, where you could list the ones we've missed or add more detail to the stories of the one we told. And then we thought, why don't we do something that has a few more pictures and a little simpler language, and that's the children's edition. And why do we do that? We do that because we wanted Canadians to take pride in our innovators and to know those stories, but then come to the conclusion that I said a moment ago, that we're all innovators. If we have that habit of mind of doing things better, that curiosity that says we look at any particular situation and say, how do we look at this from a different angle and with others make it better? That's innovation.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier when we were chatting around it's all about mindset. Because at the end of the day, what creates competitiveness in our children and ourselves, and what makes the difference is what's between our ears and how we look at things, how we look at opportunities, how we look at risk, how about trying new things. All these things that we can help encourage and foster in our children is what's most important to most equip them for the future in this global competitive world out there. So,
and speak about that world, Charles. When we were chatting outside, we were asking one another, what about our Canada, the country we love? Where do we stand on the innovation scale? And do we have any threats? Do we have any worries? Do we have any things that should concern us?
Absolutely not. We're in Nirvana. We live in Canada where it's perfect. We have fish, we have oceans, we have trees, we have mines. We have all these amazing natural resources. We're safe politically. We're stable-ish. We have so many good things going for us. We don't need to innovate, right? And we talked about how about little countries that don't have much, like Israel, like Taiwan, like Hong Kong, like Finland,
Singapore,
places where
Finland.
They don't have a whole lot. Does necessity breed invention or innovation? Is that what we need? Is scarcity for us to do that?
Well, that's a rhetorical question, I think, thrown at all of you. But, I do worry about the complacency that comes from living in such a good country and taking it for granted. I mentioned at the outset that Canada is a social innovation, and it's not absolutely certain that our fundamental values, our rule of law, our sense of civility, our belief that evidence-based science will be the basis for our public policies, etc., will always occur. Things are not quite as simple as that. And I think we have to work constantly at making this Canadian experiment work. When I was installed in the job as Governor General 7.5 years ago, the title of my installation address was A Smart and Caring Nation, a Call to Service. And both of those adjectives are important, smart and caring. But I think you have to work every day about being smart and caring, and the culture of innovation is very much a part of that. Looking at where you are, saying how we do things better, and especially if that doing things better has the consequence of making life a little happier for your neighbor or your near neighbor.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's why we're all here today, right? Is to help our children to figure out what are the skills in the future that we're going to need to be more innovative, to be more entrepreneurial. We'll hear those two words being used simultaneously, back and forth. I think they're definitely related. I think innovation is one of the key core skill sets of being entrepreneurial. Others would be things like taking risks, knowing how to get resources, scarce resources, and be able to work with people and use critical thinking to solve problems. All these things that we think are so important in the future for our children. That's why we're here. And that's why I think in our education system, we need to make this mandatory. We need to make it so that all our children in public school education from early on has the ability to learn about, practice, fail, and learn from these skills, because they're what's going to make our kids more capable for the future. I mean, you talk a lot about resiliency and the issues around us maybe getting a little bit soft as a nation. There's no better time than now, right?
Charles, why don't I comment a bit on that? I'll tell you my one or two favorite stories, favorite innovations from innovation. You might tell us what your one or two favorite innovations are, and then why don't we ask folks in the audience for their questions or observations so this becomes a conversation. Tom Friedman, a book that some of the adults here would know. Thanks for being late. 4 or 5 great books. Friedman is looking at this age of acceleration where change is occurring at ever faster waves and like that, and our ability to adjust to that, to develop the civilized rules, et cetera, is at that level, and that gap is very difficult. So what do we do? Well, he says go back to the basics of the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but he adds to that 4 C's. And the 4 C's that he would love to see developed both in our educational programs and in how young people develop are, first of all, creativity, secondly, communication, thirdly, collaboration, and the 4th is coding. Now, the 4th is where I'm not completely there yet, but my co-author, Tom Jenkins, who's a high-tech guy, believes that coding is it. And I'm almost there because I think it would help to learn about coding as the methodology, as the technology, because then you could understand the organizational principles that lie behind that and how it can work for you. But for me, the most important C is not those 4 C's. The most important C is curiosity, how you develop curiosity and cause it to always ask how things differ. Favorite of these 297 stories, probably the light bulb. Light bulb, where was that invented? Anybody know? Yeah, where? Canada, yes. Not Thomas Edison in the United States, but 2 Ontario engineers who realized that if you passed an electrical current through copper wires, it went through pretty quickly. But then if you have those 2 copper wires branched by tungsten or some very resistant metal for an electrical current, it produced a glow. And out of that came the light bulb. They put it in a glass shell, and they patented it. But they didn't have the money to take that pilot project and develop it to a commercial scale. They didn't have the manufacturing plant. They didn't have the distribution center. They didn't have the marketing, et cetera. But Thomas Edison of General Electric did, circa 1870, so bought the patents. And that's how the General Electric company came about. Just 150 years later, one of the great companies in the world. It was a Canadian invention that we didn't develop in Canada because we didn't have the other innovative attributes that we needed. Another favorite of mine, and that's the last one I'll mention, is the life jacket. The life jacket has probably saved more lives and taught more people how to swim, and therefore saved their life, than almost anything we can think of. Well, where did that happen? That's a pre-European Canadian innovation. The Inuit people in hunting seals worried about death not by drowning, but by hypothermia. As they're hunting seals on an ice floe and they fell off, before they could get back up on the ice floe, the temperature change would take over and they die of hypothermia. So they developed a vest that covered the whole torso, made of seal skin and then sinew of caribou to hold it together, and it covered their torso so their arms and legs were free. So that came from the Inuits, as did the kayak, as did the igloo, and the canoe from our First Nations people and so on. And there are many pre-European innovations in the book that really make me rather proud of our Canadian history, because it started before Champlain's first settlement in 1606. Charles, should you and I react to that, and then we go to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. I think that innovation abounds, and again, the relationship between innovation and entrepreneurship, as you said, is that the idea or the invention, if you will, still needs to be brought out to the world, and it needs to be taken to that next level. Otherwise, it's just the data or it's just the idea. And I think encouraging us to think more entrepreneurially, to take these opportunities not just to the idea, but all the way through a bit further. Back to my concept around how these small countries with no resources get a lot by. You know, we cut down a lot of wood, ship it to some little Scandinavian country, and have it shipped back at 10x value. That's the kind of stuff we want to capture. That's the kind of stuff where we want to create value on. And I think that the combination of innovation with entrepreneurship is what's going to do that, to add the most value to our country and for our kids. So I think with that, maybe we'll turn it over to the audience a little bit.
As I asked for questions, I just took my smartphone out of my pocket, and bear in mind, Mike Lazaridis, RIM BlackBerry, that's where the smartphone came about. That's described in the book as well, out of Kitchener-Waterloo. Questions or observations from the floor, and I suspect there's probably a microphone or two for anyone who wants to stand up and pose a question. Any takers? Yeah, middle row there. Stand up and speak good and loudly.
So when you guys were innovating within like your field, what was the kind of the biggest challenge that you had to face, and why, like, how did that come about, and how did you overcome that?
Biggest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them, Charles?
I'll talk about it from my business Vega, which we started a while back. When we first entered the market, the shelf was literally all animal-based products. So it was like dairy and whey and egg and so forth. And so trying to get our plant-based options across they were kind of like, huh, are you crazy? That's too expensive. It looks like dirt and grass, tastes worse. There aren't enough vegans out there. So we had a lot of scrutiny around this, because early on, when you're the first or one of the first, there isn't a lot of precedence to follow on. So really, we became really bad listeners to that, and instead really tried to do a lot of education and really a lot of awareness with consumers, and literally it was like, I hate, you see the cliche, it's like person by person, store by store, but working really hard and being convicted on something, being really believing in something, even when others don't, is I think the number one most important thing. That's where we talk about resiliency again and perseverance, and they're not just hype words, they're very real. Sometimes it takes long enough for a lunatic to turn into a hero, or to be the right, to be the right person. It takes a long time, and you need to keep shouting from the rooftops and not give up. And I know it sounds corny, but it's so true. And I think in kids these days, the more we can foster that to when they really believe themselves, even though others might go, I don't know about that, to not give up, to not give in to the popular thought, and to say, no, I really believe in what I believe in, and I'm going to do it.
Just to give one example, one major project in which I was involved as president of the University of Waterloo beginning in 1999 was we had a substantial amount of acreage right beside the university, and for 30 years we were trying to create a research and technology park on that land, and we were unsuccessful. And we got humble and decided, why were we unsuccessful? One, we were depending upon large multinationals like Microsoft, who hired more of our students than any other university, IBM, who took more of our intern students, Cisco, who just paid $600 million to buy a Waterloo company, a Hewlett-Packard, who actually bought some land for an R&D center. Their thoughts changed, and that wasn't working. Secondly, the mindset up to that point had been to sell real estate, pure se, for an R&D park. Well, we turned all of that on our heads and said, we're not selling real estate. Canada's got a lot of real estate. What we're selling is talent. That is, you want to locate your commercial operation, especially the R&D side of it, close to the mine. And the mine of gold is this remarkable talent that is being graduated every June or the in-between times at the University of Waterloo, plus being as close as you can to the ideas that are being worked on at the bench by professors and their students, and develop trust relationships between those ideas at the bench and those people who are prepared to commercialize it. And then we got humble a little more and said the university had begun 46 years earlier by local business people wanting an engineering school. We went back to those local business people, and out of that, the first two tenants were all spin-off companies from the University of Waterloo. One was the company for older people here that had taken the Fortran language to operate a big IBM 360 computer and turn it into Watt 4, from Fortran to Watt 5 to Wattcom, bought by a company called Sybase, and they established themselves there. John Chen, who currently runs BlackBerry in Waterloo, was then the head of Sybase in California, and that was first tenant. The second tenant was OpenText, a large company today, but it was the Oxford English Dictionary project that came out of the University of Waterloo around about 1980, when Oxford English Dictionary, which took 53 years to produce the first edition, that came out about 1902, on manual cards for each word, needed a search engine to search all English literature from Chaucer on to determine when a word in the English language first appeared, what its meaning was then, and how that meaning had changed over the decades and the centuries to establish its meaning today. That search engine became then the search engine for Yahoo and Google and the others, but it was developed out of some computer science professors and some 4 or 5 co-op summers over a couple of summers at the University of Waterloo. It was not exploited in Canada because we didn't have the bandwidth at that time to have a consumer market search engine. California did, but OpenText confined itself to the within the business search, and from that came OpenText. So those were the first 2 tenants. The third then was an accelerator center to spawn more of those companies like OpenText. So we had a failure at the start, couldn't go anywhere, 30 years. We went at it differently, we succeeded. And we learned from that OpenText story that when they developed their search engine, it wasn't commercially viable with the broad market, but it became commercially viable for the knowledge and information within a particular corporation with a very, very intricate search engine. Other questions or observations? Or third row here. I'm going to give you my mic. There's a microphone coming up.
What is the one most valuable piece of advice you can offer us young entrepreneurs?
I missed the question, Charles. Do you want to repeat it?
What is the one most important piece of advice we can give to young entrepreneurs?
Well, be curious and be resilient. Charles?
I'm going to get a little more tactical. Cash conversion cycle. Sound familiar? You probably learned it in business school, maybe not. But in the real world of paying for your rent, high margins combined with long payment terms, combined with short collection times and reinvestment of capital is the way to grow your business without diluting too early, without raising money unnecessarily, and allowing you to grow fastest. So if you're not obsessed about cash management and the cash conversion cycle, you're probably going to be devaluing your business too early, diluting too early, and not optimizing your business. So that's in the weeds, but cash conversion.
So let me give something that's in between Charles' very practical, very specific business plan advice and my theory. And that would be if you have the innovation, you want to find a customer. You want to find a need for it. And in fact, the best innovation is usually driven backwards. There is a need that somebody sees, and you have to then respond to that need with the technique, the tools, the idea that responds appropriately to that need. Lots of people have invented better mousetraps, but you have to have the mousetrap that people actually use, and it catches mice better than the old variety with the spring and the wood on it. Other questions or observations? Gentleman here. Should get some young people as well. Microphone, can we get it here? Coming up from the back.
All right, so for like a small startup, partnerships and networks would be key. How would you advise us on approaching larger corporations to develop those networks? Like, what would you tell us to do to make ourselves stand apart from the rest?
Charles?
I think taking a direct approach to the very top of the organization today is much more feasible than ever before. For example, you're more likely to get a response from the CEO of a company through LinkedIn than the buyer. So go to the top, bat higher than your pay grade, and see if you can get a conversation at a higher level for why what you think you can do really means something, and don't waste people's time. Make sure you're able to communicate what it is that you're actually doing that's of value, that's above the rest, versus the usual just, let me list my 14 features and benefits. So cutting through that clutter, going to the top might be some ways.
I guess I'd add to that, whatever it is you're doing, make it so compelling that it's hard for people to turn down. And that's easy, but that means developing your prototype, your small business idea, the little fish that Charles was catching when he was a 4-year-old, or maybe you were a 7-year-old, Charles, compelling enough that pet store actually did want them. And then, with any luck, find yourself into an incubator center, accelerator center. Simon Fraser University has superb opportunities that way, where you can develop trusted relationships with angel investors, first of all, and then once you're there with commercial partners, on you go. I always say to professors and students at the University of Waterloo, don't try to become a business person or a commercial venture capitalist. Continue to be a great professor of computer science or organic chemistry and work with your students, and then realize that that expertise in the lab and the classroom is wonderful, but it has very little to do with building a better mousetrap that people are prepared to pay for and develop. Don't be like the two inventors that developed the light bulb. Wonderful guys, and they got patents, but they needed a Thomas Edison and a General Electric to bring along. Find your way to those General Electrics or the intermediate or the more junior varieties that can bring things along. But the compelling case is the thing that is so important. Develop it to the point where this is so good people won't refuse it. Other observations? Younger people got some questions or thoughts, reactions? It's way back there on the right, I think. Charles, you can probably see them. I can't.
Go for it.
Hi, my name is Brady Lumsden. I'm a grade 11 student at Walnut Grove Secondary out in Langley, BC. My question to you is, you spoke earlier about how Canada is a great place to live. It's a nirvana. It's an amazing country, which it is. But there are so many problems and so many needs that we have that people don't know about. 1.2 million children in Canada are living in poverty. Native women are still being forcibly sterilized in the prairies and up north, still today. How is it that we educate the public, educate the youth, and educate the future innovators about these problems and about the needs that exist in our own country and around the world?
You want to take first crack?
I prefer you do.
I guess you begin with people like you who say we have a huge gap in this country. We're a country that believes in public education, that has been a remarkable creation of equality of opportunity, yet our public education system lacks or misses so many parts of our society and should. And we work, I think, beginning in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities to try to identify those things. Probably you want to concentrate on one or maybe two where you're lending your own efforts and you persuade your neighbors, and if you're raising a family, your children and your grandchildren, that these are important things, especially in a country like Canada that believes we're smart and caring, not just for those of us who are pretty lucky, but those who are really left behind. And for me, that would be the ultimate test of whether Canada is a success or not, is whether we can make it a place that is an equal opportunity for all of its citizens and not just the 80 or 90%. But it's a job that falls to all of us. And I would specifically focus on our First Nations people. You know, we've had 400 years of history since the Europeans have arrived. It's been a pretty good go for most of us who've come from away. It's not been a very good go for those who were here before we arrived. We're on a path of reconciliation, which I think is positive, but we have very considerable steps to make. And it's so important that that reconciliation journey be one in which we're all involved and not simply our First Nations people and not simply a few people that have made themselves aware of that and are working at it, but something for all of us.
I think you answered that really well. I'm just going to add one more thing to this. The very same skills that can create, let's say, a really great business via entrepreneurship, the innovation, the entrepreneurial mindset can be equally effectively used in social enterprise, in social impact, in moving the needle in nonprofits, for example. So we don't have to limit what we learn and these skills that we're talking about to just business. We can also use it to make change. And I think that young people have the most opportunity to do that because they're so connected. They know the tools that can be used to reach people, and they're so. I think they have such a big area and passion for this. So I would say, just like David said, start this movement and identify it, get others to join, and use your ability to communicate to amplify your message. I think people are going to want to follow that.
I think we've got time for one or two more questions. The organizer will tell us. Just while I have a break, take the microphone down, please, to the third last row there. Just outside the door here and down to the left, there's a booth that has some of the artifacts that are described in these two books of Ingenious and Innovation Nation. If any of you want to get a photograph of yourself with a life jacket or a light bulb or peanut butter or some of the other things that are there, a BlackBerry, do so, and you can do it when this session is closed, just outside and to the left. Question back in the third last row.
Hi there. So I had a question in regards to how you originally started your business. Being a man that raised a company that is now currently valued at over 550 million, how did you get your initial starting capital?
Life savings, second mortgage on my house, 4 credit cards, all maxed out, and I sold my Toyota 4Runner for $27,000 to keep the lights on, and shared a car with my wife, and she was a teacher and lived on one salary. So basically, it's just all in. I didn't raise any money until we were over 25 million in revenue and didn't need the money. I raised money for a different reason. So that's why I say being able to really reinvest and watch your dollars and be really cognizant of your costs and inventory and all those technical things we talk about in business are so important. And I think right now a lot of people raise money, they brag about how much they raise. That's not a metric that we look at as being successful, by the way, how much you raise. We don't care. It's what you do. And so I think that if you keep that in mind and not thinking about fundraising as a status thing, but more as a necessary evil at the right time, that'll be your best thing. So yeah, usually if the founder doesn't have a lot of their dollars in, if they're not all in, it won't attract investment anyways.
What I draw from that, Charles, is a forbearing and saint-like wife. Other questions? Some of your own experience. The second last row, there's a question there.
Hey, it's me.
There are 2 there. If the microphone can get down to the left.
Oh, okay.
Over where?
I'm just right here. Okay.
You're good.
Got it. Go ahead.
All right. So my name is Ron, and I'm a grade 12 student. I'm just curious about what are some books and advice that you've achieved over the years to help you get to where you were. You might have already talked about some already.
Do you want to put that to Charles? How did you get to where you were, Charles? And then I'm older, and it takes me longer to think about that.
I would say the most influential book I've ever read for business for young entrepreneurs or for entrepreneurs, period, is called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. E-Myth, killer book. It's the whole concept of working on your business, not in it. But what I really love reading the most that gives me inspiration are entrepreneurial stories. So I love books like Shoe Dog, most recently by Phil Knight, for example, or How to Deliver Happiness. Delivering Happiness, by Tony Hsieh from Zappos. Stories like that give me inspiration, and they all tell the same stories of literally, kind of like going from rags to riches and going through all, and it's not about money, but I'm talking about like the amount of perseverance and hardship they had to endure to get to where they were. That resiliency is so motivating. I love reading about those stories, and I think that young people would do well to see what others have gone through. When you see this overnight success, it usually was predicated by 10 years of digging ditches and filling in those holes and then digging them up again. So very messy, very maybe unglamorous, but that's what it took to get there. So read those books.
I'd say 2 things about my history. I grew up in a northern Ontario town. I came from a very modest family. My first job was at age 9. I never felt that I worked. It was a terrific experience. The last university where I was president is the largest cooperative education university in the world. I wouldn't start a university or college tomorrow without having experiential learning. Theory and practice going hand in hand. It's a great basis for lifelong learning. The other thing I would say about my own background is my first university was in the United States and my second was in the United Kingdom before I came back to Canada. And those international experiences for me, I think, were very good. And I've seen it again in my children. And now my grandchildren, the eldest of whom is 15, we have 14 grandchildren. As my daughters began at age 12 being involved in international exchanges, and they've studied in many countries around the world, and they've been in volunteer situations around the world. And while they came from, as I was an adult, my wife and I were reasonably affluent, so they were in affluent families, but through their church and other experiences, they were exposed to poverty, and that was a very important lesson for them. And 4 things happened in their development, coming to the question that was asked by our friend over here from grade 11. The first thing that being exposed internationally into environments other than their own, real poverty, was they became more curious. Why is this so? Why is this happening this way? Why is that person's circumstance different than mine? The second thing that happened is they became more tolerant in the sense that you're different from me. Nobody gets hurt. That's okay. What makes you different? What lies behind your heritage? The third thing is their judgment became better. They looked for the other side of the story. They wanted more evidence before they came to a judgment, and they were really quick to spot bigotry. Just prejudice, spouting slogans without substance. But the most important thing of all that I saw them develop was empathy. Not just sympathy, I feel for your problems, but empathy, I walk in your shoes. And those four qualities, I think, in my children at least, were very important features of the people they are now and the leadership that they exert. Time for one more? No, yes? One quick question and we'll be quick in our answer. Go ahead, right there, third last row.
Hi, thank you. My question would be, I think it would apply to many of the grade 11 and 12 students in the room who are interested in pursuing a career in entrepreneurship. What are your opinions on post-secondary options for students that are interested in this sort of stuff? Because many people, I heard a story this morning for the person who started Smart Suites, they actually dropped out of UBC because they wanted to pursue their passion in business. And I think a lot of students in my class are wondering whether we should go into business school or we should just sort of go with what we've been told to do and just keep at it. So, thank you.
I should plead the fifth, because I have 3 young children who have asked me some questions like that. I would say absolutely go to school, because learning to learn, meeting others in like-minded situation, enjoying the fact that you have a long career ahead of you. Like, you're going to have probably 7.5 jobs or businesses or whatever, and you're going to work for a long, long time. Retirement it's not the same as it was before. You're going to want to do things because you want to, not because you have to. You're not going to do 9 to 5. You're going to work when you want to. So I'd say go to school, love it, enjoy it, get all the best parts of it, and then you're going to probably meet some wicked people there that you might share a journey with or not. And if you come up with something that's so great and so compelling that you say, hey, it's worth leaving all this for, then do it. But go to school first.
I'd say 3 things very quickly. One is follow your passion, find and follow your passion. Secondly, if you do want to earn a living, be conscious of whether your passion is in fact leading you into something where you can do that, and if not, then be prepared to lead a somewhat more limited life. On the other hand, you may follow a particular passion that isn't the business route, but you're developing business skills. Secondly, I'm a great believer in experiential learning. I would expose yourself to the practice of whatever it is you're passionate about to see what it means in real life. And then thirdly, I would try to be deep and broad, not so deep in one area that you lose the breadth in others, but not so broad across every selection that you can make on the smorgasbord board that you don't go into the depth of some particular area and get beyond 3 or 4 levels of questioning where you're really coming at some of the fundamental features of it. I guess with that we should wrap up, Charles. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.